So hi everyone, I'm Patty Letsky. I'm the Product Management Director at PTC, responsible for Arbortext Editor and Arbortext Publishing Engine. And so today I'm going to go over what's coming in our October release. First, I have just a review of what we've released over 2019 and 2020. And in particular, I am going to just quickly go over the 8010 features, since those will also be included in our 8100 release that is due out next month in October. So first off, for 8010, the changes that went into Arbortext, first off was support for OpenJDK. So now, in addition to working with the Oracle Java, we also will work with Amazon Corretto 11. We added back the publish to PostScript feature, so that's available in Editor and Publishing Engine. And we were able to remove the restriction that we had for a long time, where HTTP only had to be turned off when you were using forms-based authentication. So on the WINDCHILL server or on a SSO server, you had previously had to turn HTTP only off. And this was especially timely because WINDCHILL now has this on by default. So starting with 8010, Arbortext now just works out of the box without requiring you to make this change to the WINDCHILL server. And all of those are carried forward into our upcoming 8100 release. And this is, as I said, scheduled for October. The highlights of 8100, and I'll go into more detail on each of these, but the highlights are we've improved our cloud support, in particular when we've got WINDCHILL in the cloud and therefore Publishing Engine is in the cloud. We've got some improvements there. There are some enhancements to our WINDCHILL REST services. Then there were some customer requests. Many of these came from the Arbortext Symposium that we held. So, and I'll go into these in more detail, but we've added back the insert divisions. There's now a graphics preview in the CMS browser. We've added a CMS toolbar, and Editor will remember the location and size of your modify attributes dialog box across the editor sessions. We've added support for multimedia publishing in Styler, and actually Simon will cover that in the second portion of this webinar. And then we are removing support for Editor in a web browser. So this was the specific Arbortext embed protocol. We had announced it as deprecated in 8.0, and now in 8.1 we'll be removing that support. So for the Publishing Engine changes, this is support for Publishing Engine. Again, when WINDCHILL is in the cloud, then Publishing Engine is also in the cloud. And this might be publishing service structures. So those of you who are familiar with it, that's the sys worker, or Arbortext Documents, which is the APE worker for both of those. And the main changes are really just some enhanced default security. So we want the initial security settings to be a little tighter, a little more appropriate for use in a cloud environment rather than in an intranet environment. And really we believe that these are changes that you probably want in your intranet environment as well. They will require some configuration when you first install Arbortext Publishing Engine. So in the release notes, look for some side effects of some of these being on by default. And of course, you can revert them if they're not appropriate for you and you're running in an intranet environment. But first off, we will be turning on the security framework by default. There's been a security framework available in Arbortext Publishing Engine for several releases now. It allows you to specify which of the functions and features of Publishing Engine should require particular roles in order to accomplish. And out of the box, there are some of the features that are determined or specified as administrator role. So out of the box, you would need to establish a user that has an administrator role in order to access those features. And it's all very configurable, and there's documentation about how to use the security framework in the Help Center. But as I said, it will be turned on by default now. The second change will be that we're requiring that you use the trusted host authentication when you're authenticating on the WINDCHILL side. In other words, when Publishing Engine authenticates to WINDCHILL. And really, this is good practice. It's been available for many, many releases, but in general, we don't always see customers using it. So again, the default will be to require you to use trusted host. There will be a Publishing Engine setting that you can turn on so that if you just know that you need to use the username password authentication in the auth properties, you can do that. And that's certainly appropriate for demo environments or test environments and so on. But in general, we are trying to encourage people not to use that type of authentication. There are some improvements to logging. In general, a lot of our PE logging included more information than you necessarily need. In particular, in a cloud environment, um, knowing the exact installation path or of where PE is installed and some of that isn't necessarily needed in certain logging messages. So we've just gone through and cleaned up some of our logging messages. And again, this is configurable. You can adjust the settings just as you've always been able to adjust the settings in the past. And the last change is that HTTPS will now be the default, so that the communication, rather than running on just HTTP, will be on HTTPS. And again, this will require some additional configuration in terms of certificates. If you don't want to use it, you can turn it off after installation. As far as the WINDCHILL REST services, so this is the API on the WINDCHILL side. The dynamic document, as I imagine many of you know, that's the data structure in WINDCHILL that contains Arbortext XML content. And the WINDCHILL REST services for a few releases now have had a dynamic document domain. And over time, we continually improve our API support for Arbortext content in WINDCHILL. And so in particular, in the next release, which is WRS 2.1, we've improved our link handling, and we've added explicit APIs for adding and removing both the required links and the reference links. So the member links, which are the required links, and the reference links. And you can see I just showed some examples of what that looks like. And as I said, as we go forward in future releases, we'll continue to add additional functionality. But for the 2.1, we focused on these link-related APIs. And the details are available in the WRS 2.1 system. Now, as far as these usability improvements are concerned, I've got some slides on the details of those. The first request that we had was, as many of you know, we cleaned up the toolbars. I believe that was one of the 7.0 releases. We cleaned them up, and over time we keep getting asked, can you put this one back, or I really wish we had that one. And previously we had added an advanced toolbar to restore some of these that people have requested. But the one that the current one that's been requested is to restore the insert divisions. And we did change the name slightly. Now it's called Insert Markup by Category, because when you click on it, it'll bring up this dialog box. And as you can see, division is one of the categories that might be configured, but you can also have a number of other categories configured in your DCF file. So in this particular example, you see division, but you also see graphic or so on, technical and so forth. So those types of categories are identified in the doc type configuration file. And then in addition to adding it to the toolbar, it is also in the insert menu. So you can access this dialog box through the menu system as well. The next request that we had was for a graphics preview in the CMS browser. So we had previously a graphics preview in the DITA Resource Manager, but not for customers that were not using DITA. So now in the CMS browser, when you land on a graphic, you'll get this preview pane to the right, and there's a button. It's a little hard to see right now because it's grayed out in this screenshot, but there's a display button just below that preview pane. So if you're looking at something in the CMS, you want to get a preview of it, just click on display and you'll be able to see the preview of that graphic. And that's pretty much how the resource manager worked as well. The other thing to mention is that this does support the graphics fallback. So there are some cases in WINDCHILL where you might have a graphic that actually isn't visible in the editor window. For it's a format that Arbortext doesn't recognize, but you have the secondary content set to something like a JPEG or something more commonly viewable. And if that's the case, then in the preview window, we will find the secondary content. So if you've set up your graphics fallback for editor in general, it'll also work in this preview. And then another request that we had gotten was, again, it related to the toolbars, for a CMS toolbar, so that the commonly done operations are just right there and available to you. So when you're working with a WINDCHILL document, there will be this additional toolbar. It has check-in, check-out, undo checkout, and object properties available right there. Those operations are still in the right-click menu. They're still under the object menu, but now they're also available through this toolbar. And this was another request that we got, and I know this slide is a little busy, but hopefully it is understandable. The general request, if you look on the left side, that's showing the DITA Resource Manager, and you can see that in that tree control of the DITA Resource Manager, the strings were limited to only 30 characters. So that red arrow on the left, it's showing that that string got cut off after it says 2020, and then you just see the 3 dots indicating that there's more. So now there is a preference available to you. That's the middle part of this slide, and it's called Resource Manager Label Length. So in this case, what I'm showing is I increased that to 40 so that you can get more of the string visible. And then over on the right, you can see that we've got 10 extra characters visible. So rather than having that be hard-coded to 30, now you can see more. And of course, you can make it much larger. If it's larger than the real estate that you're giving the resource manager, you'll just get a scroll bar at the underneath this tree control. So essentially, it's up to you how you want to set up, of course, your real estate within your window, but this will allow you to see a longer string in that tree control. And then this last one, it's a little hard to have a screenshot of it, but one of the requests that we've gotten quite a few times was that the modify attributes dialog, we weren't remembering the location and the size of it. So if you brought up editor and you resized it or moved it around and then closed editor, it wasn't retaining the settings, the places where you wanted it to be. So now, as long as when you exit editor, as long as you do save your window configuration, say yes in this example here, then modify attributes when you exit editor, come back into editor, it'll be where you wanted it to be. So that's my summary of what's coming in 8.1 for Arbortext Editor and Arbortext Publishing Engine.
Thanks, Patty. I don't see any questions, so like I said, if you have any questions, please enter them, and we'll get to them maybe after Simon's presentation. Simon, you're next.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll see if I can get my right screen. Can you see my screen okay, Melissa?
No, not yet.
Oh, no, because I'll have to hit the share button. That would be helpful.
There we go.
Start. Okie dokie. Thanks, Patty. Thanks, Melissa. So this is going to be in two parts. First, I'm going to talk about what's coming in Styler 8.1, and then I'll talk about what's coming in Layout Developer 12.1. So let's start with Styler. We've got a couple of new things going on in here. Firstly, the ability to publish multimedia to PDF and HTML, the inclusion of View 3D as a graphic type, and some updates to the preview icons, which is kind of a minor thing, but there's an extra little bit in there as well. So for this release, the big feature is the ability to publish multimedia to PDF and HTML. By multimedia, I mean MP4 for video and MP3 for audio. To support this, there's a new style type in Styler, and that's multimedia, which is sort of highlighted in that screenshot. You can style your element as a multimedia type, and then you get some options to control that multimedia when it goes out to the end result, the PDF or the HTML. So you can specify whether it's video or audio. That will change the elements which are created in HTML or the way that it's embedded within in your PDF. You can specify whether that video or audio auto plays when it's opened, and you can specify whether it loops or not. Okay, so this is a new style type, so it will require your style sheets to be updated in order to be able to support this, but you'll get a warning of that when you open up your style sheet in Styler anyway. So go ahead and select that style for things like video data if you're using DocBook, for example. You can then drive the type, whether it's video or audio, based on any of the conditions. So you can test the file extension in the linked object to see whether it's video or audio, or you can look for a type attribute, that kind of thing. And then you can specify whether it's video or audio. By default, we'll assume that you're placing video, but you can control it through the style sheet too, if you like. So that's quite a big one. That's quite good news. Kind of going alongside that in Styler, and if I could remember how to change slides, that would be good. We're supporting you being able to use U3D graphics when you're publishing to PDF. So U3D is a 3D graphical format. You can create them from Creo Illustrate. There is a way of exporting those and creating them as secondary content in WINDCHILL. If you do that, or if you just link directly to a U3D object and publish to PDF, that 3D graphic will appear in your PDF, and you'll be able to manipulate it in Acrobat, that kind of thing. So you don't have to do anything special. There's no special file type or anything like that. You just treat it as a normal graphic, and it will magically work inside your PDF. We supported that for a while in APP, or Layout Developer, and now it's supported through the sort of Styler style sheets and the Styler engine. If you want to start interacting with it, then you either need to write some pretty hefty source edits, or you really need to consider using a native APP template. But it is possible to interact with the 3D object in the PDF, so you can create form fields, that kind of thing, that talk to it and show different views or hide different parts of the tree, that kind of thing. So that's the U3D part. And finally, for Styler, we've updated the preview icons. What we found was that the HTML preview button had taken a little holiday. It disappeared. So we've reinstated that, and while we were doing that, we took the opportunity to update the preview icons. So if you can't see the icon you're looking for, that's because we've changed them. There they are up there in a little bit of a screenshot to show you what they look like. But the big deal is that HTML preview is back. I missed it. I'm pretty sure everybody else did too. So that's the update for Styler. I can't see any questions, so we'll move on to what's coming up in Layout Developer 12.1. So there's quite a lot of new stuff in this release. And this is like the highlights of it. But the first thing I want to talk about is the release of a new product. This is coming out at the same time as 12.1. And it's a new version of Layout Developer aimed specifically for those users who just use it for manual work. So they might get a template from a template developer, but all they want to do is create and edit pages by hand. So they might want to tweak a bit of text. They might want to move some frames around on a page. They might want to make some corrections to the text, you know, like spelling corrections, that kind of thing. They might want to change some kerning on a line to save a line. All these kind of manual document finishing tasks or sort of manual page building tasks. Now, these guys don't typically want all the developer tools. So what we've done is we've hidden those or removed those from Layout Editor. And what this means is that all the template code that a layout developer has created in the template is protected. Now, this is great because it means that nobody can corrupt the template and make things look completely wrong elsewhere. They can only make changes in line to the styling and the formatting of the text, which is seen there. What we've done to support this is provide a bunch of tools, and I'll talk about those in a little while, which allow users to create custom interfaces to help their layout editor users use the product and to use their templates in the way that they intend them to be used. So the other big deal about this product release is that it's a lot lower cost than Layout Developer. Because we don't have all the development functionality, it's a lot lower cost. So the idea would be that you would have 1 or 2 licenses of Layout Developer to create your templates and maintain those, and then you'd have a larger number of Layout Editor users who will do the manual work and create and edit the pages for you. Okay, this is just a quick highlight of it. I will have a separate presentation later this year and maybe some YouTube videos to talk about what Layout Editor is and how it's intended to work and all that kind of good stuff. So keep an eye out for that. Or if you've got any questions about it, you can always drop me a line and I can talk to you at length about it. So the next thing, and this is kind of in support of the layout editor product, is the idea that we can now, using JavaScript, create and manipulate toolbars. So the formatting object model has a bunch of new objects and APIs which allow you to create and define actions. So toolbars are made up of actions. Each of the little icons that you'll see in a toolbar, we consider that as an action. It has an icon associated with it. It has some code that you can run. It has, like, as you can see up here in the top right, it has like the gray test, whether it's selected or not, the menu text, that kind of thing. So you can create and define those in JavaScript dynamically, and then you can build and manage your toolbars by combining those actions together. So you can create a new toolbar, you can put a whole bunch of actions on it, but you can also add space and fills and text to those toolbars as well to make it look sort of more useful. All of those different items can be managed through the JavaScript API. And then you can tell layout developer or layout editor which toolbars to show, whether to refresh them or not. You can specify things like you just want to show the icons or the icons and text, you want to show a different margin, that kind of thing. So the idea here is that customers will be able to create dynamic environments, dynamic interfaces for their solutions, which can be driven by toolbars, which can then be tied to different things. So in 12.0, we added the idea of template events. So if something changes, then you can execute a bit of code. So you might change page, or you might change the working mode that you're in. That will trigger an event, and you can tie which toolbars get displayed to those events. So if somebody pages up or pages down, and you can interrogate that page, find out what's needed, and then stick up a different set of toolbars to help your users work with the templates that you've created. So that's JavaScript toolbars. As I said, they're in support really of layout editor, but it's also great benefit to layout developer users to be able to manipulate and change their toolbars. Now this other feature is kind of similar, but it's there to make life easier for people who are creating templates. Now, one of the things that you do quite a lot when you're creating a template solution for somebody is create a bunch of tools for them to be able to do stuff in the document. So, for example, they might want to be able to make something bold in the XML that's they're editing in the yellow bar, or they might want to insert a graphic or insert a table, that kind of thing. Traditionally, in Layout Developer, you would have had to create a whole set of dialog boxes and a whole load of code behind the scenes to work with those dialog boxes to be able to insert this stuff. What we've done in this release is to automate a lot of that as much as possible. So you can now create at either the application level or the template level a set of insert markup definitions. And these definitions will have things like what do you want the title of the dialog box to be, what do you want the field type to be, and what to do when somebody hits OK. What APP will do in the background then, it was create that dialog box automatically for you and insert the definitions that you specified as part of the definition. So you can choose from a bunch of different input fields. You can have strings, numbers, sort of simple names, you can have a Boolean, you can have lengths. These are sort of automatically validated by APP's dialog box validation code. You can choose to have a bunch of different pickers, so you can have file pickers, tag pickers, color pickers, and font pickers. Again, those use the sort of baked in APP dialog box things for those types of pickers, or you can have some user-defined lists. So if you want to create a list of something, they could be lengths, it could be number of columns in a table. It could be some things which you've predefined. You can create those lists, and then the user can select those from the drop down, as you can see in that little screenshot there. When the user hits OK, you can insert markup at the beginning and at the end of where the cursor is in the yellow bar. And you can define what that markup is. So it could be a processing instruction, or it could be some XML markup, or it could be something completely different if you want it to be. It's up to you to define that kind of thing. And you can use the value that's been input by the user and insert it anywhere in the string that you're inserting. You can also run a function when the user hits OK as well. So if the user has selected, say, 3 columns in a table, then you can run a bit of code which will manipulate the start and end markup that gets inserted, and then you can insert that into the content where it is. The thing is about this, though, it makes it a whole lot easier. That we don't require users to understand the dialog box code syntax. All they have to do is create a definition, and APP in the background will do all the hard work for you and make it look nice and make it work. So these actions, these definitions that you create, they can be then called from anywhere. They can be called from code. So there's a new way of there's a new method on the stream objects to insert an insert markup definition, but you can also tie it to toolbars and things that are in the blue bar. If you remember, in 12.0.0 we added the ability to create like custom interfaces in the blue bar, so you can click on an item in the blue bar and do something, or you can tie one of these insert markup things to that if you want, or you can tie it to keyboard shortcuts if you want to do that as well. So again, it's up to you to configure that and make it work the way you want, but we've taken care of a lot of the hard work behind the scenes to make the dialog box and make the, or sort of remove the need to write the script to do all that inserting for you. We've done that, so all you have to do is define it. So that's insert markup. As I said, it's there again in support of Layout Editor, but it's available to everybody who uses Layout Developer. They can do what they like with it and make it work. One of the themes that we're going to be concentrating on over the next couple of releases is improving this kind of usability of Layout Editor and Layout Developer to make things easier for people to create and work within the interface. Again, in support of our desire to make things more usable, we've made some changes to what's going on in the yellow bar. So for those old hands who's used the yellow bar in Layout Developer, we have, you can see the XML stream if you like, or the JavaScript code. We wanted to make that a little bit easier to use. So one of the things we added was the ability to pretty print the XML. So there's a little button on the Stream Properties toolbar, which is a new toolbar for 12.1. And this icon here, if you can see where my mouse is moving, that will pretty print the XML. So oftentimes you'll get a piece of XML that comes in and it's all just one solid long line of content. You can't find out where things are because there's about 1 million attributes defined on an element and all this kind of stuff. Hitting that button will pretty print it and indent things to make it a lot easier to read, so you can see which elements got which parent and all that kind of thing. When you do that, it'll also change the white space behavior of the stream as well, so that you won't have to reformat the document or change those things yourself. It'll do it automatically, so that the page display looks exactly the same as it should do. It's just that the content structure has changed. The reverse of that, then, if you want to compress your pretty printed content back to a single long line, don't know why you'd want to do that, but some people might. There's an option, which is this next icon here in this toolbar, which is to normalize the space in the XML stream. So that will get rid of all your indents and your carriage returns that you've just inserted, and it will just put it out as a nice long stream. Okay, so that's quite a nice little feature. Another one is that if you're using pretty printed XML, you don't want to be hitting space about a dozen times every time you start a new line. So this option here that's at the end of this toolbar allows you to auto indent in XML or inside JavaScript. So if you've indented to about 12 spaces, when you hit return, the line, and this option's on, then the line will automatically indent to 12 spaces. So you're no longer having to hit space all the time. Handy little thing. It's kind of a little minor feature, but it's going to save people a lot of time and effort when they're writing code in the yellow bar. And that's what we want. We've also updated the display objects. So for those of you who don't know, the display objects are a formatting object model representation of how the page looks and what's going on. But we've also included in that what's appearing in the yellow bar. So there's a new object called FD Edit Stream, and this object represents the content which is available in the yellow bar. So there are properties on that object which, I can't spell cursor, represent where the cursor is. I should say cursor, sorry about that. Which characters you got selected, the number of characters you got selected, which characters are available in the view, and also if you're using XML, you can see the XML node where the cursor is, which is really handy if you want to drive, for example, one of your custom toolbars or some fields in your blue bar based on where the cursor is. You can now interrogate the yellow bar to find out which node you're on and then drive your UI based on that. There's also methods available on that object to set the cursor position, and there's also a method to use one of those insert markup definitions to insert whatever markup you defined at the cursor position. So that's stuff which is, again, helpful for people who are creating interfaces on top of Layout Developer and Layout Editor to help their users. We've made some updates to the debugger in this release. So we've made some changes to the resources panel. I was finding that the resources panel was a little bit clunky and a little bit cluttered with some funny little icons in it. So we've kind of changed it a little bit. For starters, we've changed the sorting order. So capital items which start with a capital letter now get sorted with items which start with a lowercase letter. It always annoyed me that they were sorted differently. The namespaces or different sort of categories of tags are now grouped more nicely, which is a good thing. We've removed that delete icon and we've changed the behavior of the type icon as well. We shifted a lot of that stuff to a new context menu. So if you right click on a tag in the resources panel, or you right click in the away from a tag, you can get this new context menu that allows you to create a new tag. You can open the tag, you can rename it, you can change the type, and if you do change the type, then this thing becomes active. You can also find out tag information about the tag that you selected. So a little pop-up will appear which will tell you information about the tag, like the type it is, the length it is, all this kind of stuff. The type of thing you can get in tag in tbrowse inside the main interface itself. We've also enabled drag and drop in the resource panel. So if you're in the view which sorts the tags by name, you can drag one of the tags and dump it into a new namespace, and it will do that renaming and moving it to the new namespace for you. If you're viewing by type and you drag a tag from one type to another type, it will change the type for you. So there's no need now to use this interface. If you don't want to, you can just sort of drag it and drop it into the box that you want it to appear in. We've made some changes to the security in the debugger too. So one of the things that we've concentrated across Arbortext as a whole is improving our security. When you have the debugger open and you have a socket open in APP, then obviously you want to make sure that that connection is secure. And we've done three things in this release to make it more secure. The first thing is to provide a unique URI. So the URI of the debugger in the browser is now changed. You can now have it as fixed, in which case the token value is 0, or you can have it as generating a unique and random token identifier. So if you want somebody to connect remotely to your version of APP to do some debugging, you're going to need to provide that unique token in order for them to connect. You're also going to have to allow remote connections, and that's the other thing that we've done. By default, we expect most people, the vast majority of people, to be connecting locally. So you can ensure that only local connections are available in your debugger, and the connection to APP can only be opened locally. But if you want somebody else in your office to have a look through your code or to find out what's going on in your template, then you can allow remote connections, but you'd have to do that in a new security.3ad system file, which will have to be reread at startup. So yes, you can now allow or disallow remote connections to APP via the socket. Finally, we've added support for HTTPS using security certificates. We provide some information about how to generate those certificates, but if you want to use it, you can set that up in the security.3ad file to point to your certificate and your private key if you have those in place. There will be more in-depth information about this stuff in the new feature documentation, which will come with the release. But hopefully that will make sure that your APP engine is nicely secure now, and you won't get anybody doing stuff in there which they shouldn't be doing. We've made some changes to pseudo fonts as well. These are only kind of little minor enhancements, but they're useful enhancements, so I thought I'd talk about them here. The first one is that you can now scale your subfonts. You can scale them horizontally and vertically. So one of the things that you find is that not all fonts look the same size at the same point size. So your Cyrillic characters might look small compared to your Latin characters, or your Arabic characters might look tiny compared to your Japanese characters. When you're creating a pseudo font now, you can specify horizontal and vertical scaling so that they look more similar. Okay, so you can see here there's this %140, 100, so that's scaling it vertically by 140% and keeping the horizontal scaling at 100%. So now when you're creating your pseudo font, you can make them look like they actually belong together rather than looking like it is a bunch of separate fonts joined together. We've also provided a way of creating pseudo bold and pseudo italic configuration in your pseudo font. So I can't remember when it was. It might have been version 10 or something. We extended pseudo fonts so they obeyed the font family structures. So if you don't have a bold version or you don't have an italic version, now you can tell APP how to fake it. Okay, so you can say, I want my fake bold to be overprinted by this much, or I want my fake bold to use an outline that's this thick, or you can say that I want my fake italic to be askew of this angle. So that can be defined in your pseudo font now. Okay, so that's a cool thing. And finally, in our pseudo fonts, you've always been able to map one character to another character, and now it's possible using a new pseudo font keyword called map glyph to be able to map a character to a specific glyph which is inside a font. So this is piggybacking on the work that we did for OpenType back in 12.0. So now you can pick out a specific glyph by number. So if you don't like the look of one of the characters and you want to replace it with another one, then you can do that specifically in your pseudo font. Running out of time, so I thought I'd quickly go through these things. Here's a bunch of updates that we've done to the MathJax support. So MathJax is an open JavaScript library for displaying mathematical equations in a browser. It uses JavaScript, and we support using that in layout developer documents and templates. we introduced that in 12.0.0, and in this release we've added support for a number of the options which come with that release. So firstly, we upgraded to 2.7.9, which is the latest stable release of MathJax. And then we've exposed a number of the output options. So you can now specify the stroke color and thickness. You can specify the fill color. You can use some of the, well, actually you can use all of the fonts which MathJax supports. So MathJax provides SVG outlines of a number of the different fonts. So you can specify those now, which is great because it gives you access to some characters which were missing in the default font that we had. You can also specify which font to use for characters which aren't supported by the MathJax library. So you can see here that these accented characters are using Courier rather than the outline. That's because this equations font doesn't support these accented characters. So yes, you can now specify which font you want to use for that. What we haven't been able to get working yet is line breaking. This will come later. Hopefully in the next major release, we'll be upgrading to version 3, and version 3 will support line breaking. So fingers crossed about that. Finally, I thought I'd talk about this, even though it's not being released in 12.1, is that we did quite a lot of work on our CSS formatting project, which we're planning to release in 12.2. So we've done a bunch of work behind the scenes on the infrastructure within the core engine to make it work, and this next release we're going to be working on actually making it work, like the property handling and the selectors and all that kind of stuff. I think CSS will be a great benefit to the product. Being able to specify your style sheet using CSS will make layout developer a lot easier to use by a lot more people, which is what we want. Okay, so I thought I'd bring that up there. And that's the